My wife, Eleanor, lost her memory in a car accident. The crash reset her mind, winding the clock back a full decade. She woke up as a 20-year-old girl, her memory frozen at the precise moment in her life when she loved me most. Julian, so this is what you look like in 10 years. And you're my husband. She hopped off the hospital bed, her face a perfect picture of shock and pure joy. She rushed forward, throwing her arms around me in a tight embrace. This isn't a dream, is it? Oh my God, my secret crush actually came true. I stood there, stunned by her embrace, but the only thing I felt was a chilling, hollow ache. Eleanor, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You've forgotten. We divorced last month. Because you had an affair. It was the Lunar New Year, a time when every household was supposed to be filled with laughter and warmth. I, however, felt like the unluckiest man alive, standing alone in front of the cold, impersonal doors of the city hall. I had waited the entire day. By the time the staff started packing up to leave, my soon-to-be ex-wife was still a no-show. It was infuriating. She was the one who initiated the divorce, the one who signed the papers. Now, when it was time to make it official, she vanished. Was this some kind of sick joke? I was seeing red, calling her phone again and again, only to be met with the flat, impersonal tone of a powered-off device. As dusk settled and the lights of the city hall flickered off, I accepted defeat. The divorce wasn't happening today. Dejected, I trudged back to the parking garage. The moment I started the engine, my phone rang. A stranger's voice on the other end said, "Hello, are you a relative of Ms. Eleanor Jiang? This is City General Hospital. Ms. Jiang has been in a traffic accident." Fantastic. Just my luck. The marriage wasn't officially over, and now I was getting prank calls from scammers. Without missing a beat, I replied, "Yes, I'm her other half. Is she on her way out? Don't waste any medical resources. Just pull the plug." "That's right. I'm giving the order. I'll take full responsibility. You can send her straight to the morgue," I added for good measure. My response seemed to stun the person on the other end. Ms. Jiang only broke her leg. The voice stammered. He sounded young, and in turn perhaps, utterly unprepared for this kind of response from a patient's family. "We've already set the bone and put it in a cast. We were hoping. Could you possibly come down to the hospital?" His hesitant tone gave me pause. Something felt off. Still, I played it cool. "No need. A broken leg isn't a big deal. I'm a very busy man." "Oh." He sounded disappointed, but pressed on. "There's one more thing. Ms. Jiang was in the accident with a Mr. Leo Vance. We can't reach his family. Do you happen to know him?" That name was like a jolt of electricity. "I know him," I said, my voice sharp. "What happened to him?" "He's in serious condition. Multiple abrasions, and we're concerned about permanent damage to his hand. He'll likely have significant scarring." "I'm on my way." I roared into the phone. "City General, right? Which floor? What room number?" "I'll be there in 20 minutes. We're in the second wing, 5th floor." I hung up before he could finish, slamming my foot on the accelerator. The black SUV shot out of the parking lot like a sleek panther, weaving expertly through the evening traffic. My mood had done a complete 180. My wife's broken leg. Collateral damage. But Leo, her pretty boy lover, disfigured and possibly crippled? Now that was a spectacle I wouldn't miss for the world. My apathy towards Eleanor was absolute, but the news of Leo's ruin sent a thrill of anticipation through me. I raced to the hospital, skipping the elevator and taking the stairs 2 at a time. I couldn't risk being a moment too late. Even the doctor was shocked by my swift arrival. Beaming, I burst into the room. "Where's Leo?" I boomed. "How's his hand? How big are the scars? Let me see. Let me see." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. I didn't care. My heart was soaring. "Well, where is he?" Just then, the curtain around a nearby bed was pulled back. There was Eleanor, one leg encased in a thick plaster cast. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a bewildered surprise. My smile vanished instantly. Her voice trembled as she looked me up and down, a deep furrow in her brow. "You? Are you Julian's older brother?" "What?" I scoffed. "I'm your father." The word seemed to trigger something. She clutched her head, a grimace of pain twisting her features, and collapsed back onto the bed. A doctor pulled me aside. "Ms. Jiang sustained a concussion. Her memory is scrambled. She remembers basic information, but when we asked her age, she insisted she was 20. My mind was racing. Sensing my impatience, the doctor added, "Mr. Vance is on the 6th floor. He's still in critical condition, but you can see him through the observation window." I was gone in a flash, leaving a room of stunned onlookers in my wake. When I reached the 6th floor and saw him, it was everything I had hoped for and more. The man who had shattered my marriage, the man who had stood before me with arrogant defiance just days ago, was now a figure swathed in white gauze. I could see the twisted wreck of his right hand, and the face that had once been handsome was now a patchwork of raw, angry flesh. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity, but then I remembered what he had done, and the pity vanished, replaced by a cold, satisfying darkness. I was no saint. Returning to the 5th floor, I felt like a king. I pulled out my wallet and started peeling off bills, preparing to hand them out to every doctor and nurse in sight. I was going to make sure everyone shared in my good fortune. They certainly felt my joy, or at least my manic energy. The doctor took the money, his hand trembling slightly. "Mr. Hayes, your wife's condition is quite complex, and our facilities here are." I cut him off with a grand wave of my hand. "She thinks she's 20? Let her be 20. It doesn't matter," I declared magnanimously. "You're all doing a fine job. Treat her with whatever you've got. If something goes wrong, I won't hold you responsible." A heavy silence fell over the room. In the corner, unnoticed until now, stood Eleanor's personal secretary and her lawyer. They were trying to make themselves invisible, pressing against the wall as if willing it to swallow them. A slow smile spread across my face. "Of course, I have no say in Eleanor's treatment," I finally admitted to the doctor. "We may not have finalized the legal proceedings, but we've both signed the divorce agreement. I no longer have the authority to make decisions for her." I gestured toward the corner. "That's her assistant and her legal counsel." The two women flinched as all eyes turned to them. They looked mortified. "You should consult with them," I finished. The secretary and the lawyer were practically bowing, their demeanor meek and apologetic. The sight was deeply amusing. "You helped her screw me over in the divorce, but at the end of the day, you're just employees," I said, pulling out a cigarette and placing it between my lips, unlit. I gave them a disarming smile. "Don't be afraid of me. I'm not the bad guy here." The secretary stood frozen, unsure how to react. The lawyer, a young, studious-looking woman, blushed furiously under my gaze, the color creeping up her neck and over her delicate, wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Hayes," she stammered, her face as red as an apple. "You really didn't have to come." "I know," I said, my tone easy and relaxed. And I was just about to leave. At that, the curtain around the bed was yanked open again. Eleanor, lucid after another wave of pain, was awake. Her secretary rushed to her side. But the 20-year-old Eleanor looked right through her trusted aide. Her gaze, hazy and confused, found me. "Julian, what happened to you? You look older." I touched my face. A decade had passed. Of course I looked older. I had no intention of engaging with this potential madwoman. I turned to leave. A loud crash echoed behind me. Eleanor, dragging her cast, had tried to stand and had fallen in a heap on the floor. She began to crawl toward me frantically, like a desperate animal. "Julian, don't go." Her secretary tried to help her up, but Eleanor shoved her away, her face a mask of confusion and panic. This 20-year-old version of her recognized no one from her future. "I don't know you people," she screamed. "Leave me alone. Julian, wait for me. Take me with you." She collapsed on the floor, crying out toward the door as if I were her last lifeline in a cruel, unfamiliar world. "Don't leave me here." I was halfway out the door when her desperate cries made me turn back. This was Eleanor Jiang, the rising star of the tech world, a self-made woman who had clawed her way to the top, becoming a celebrated CEO before. She was 30. People called her Miss Jiang, with a mixture of respect and fear. She was known for her icy demeanor and ruthless efficiency. And now, here she was, crawling on a dirty hospital floor, dignity forgotten, begging me not to leave. I walked back and knelt in front of her. "Am I really the only one you recognize?" "Who are you?" she asked, grabbing my arm as if afraid I would vanish. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her answer came out smooth and practiced, as if reciting a memorized text. "You're Julian Hayes. You live next door. Your father's name is Robert, and your mom is a high school teacher. You're deathly allergic to peanuts and shellfish. They make you swell up like a balloon." She was perfectly correct. A muscle in my jaw twitched. "And you think you're 20? Think back," I said, trying a different tack. "When we were 20, we were sophomores in college. Does any of this look like a college campus to you?" Eleanor touched her own face, then looked back at me. A faint blush crept into her cheeks. I was speechless. I heard the doctor call you," she said, still sitting on the floor, her expression a mixture of seriousness and confusion. I knew I wasn't 20 anymore the moment I saw you. I must have hit my head and forgotten the last few years. She tightened her grip on my arm, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're my husband now. I said nothing. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I had, after all, spent an entire day at City Hall, watching countless couples either joyfully unite or bitterly separate. I had promised myself that when my time came with Eleanor, I would handle it with grace, with dignity. I was a man who cared about appearances, but I never imagined Eleanor would be so reckless, swerving her car off the road and into a guardrail with her lover by her side. I stood up, and because she refused to let go, I had to pull her up with me. She balanced precariously on her good leg, eyeing her secretary and lawyer like a cornered animal separated from its pack. To extricate myself, I turned to her secretary. Then I addressed Eleanor directly. Your name is Eleanor Jiang. You are 30 years old. You are the founder and CEO of Nexus Technologies. This is your personal secretary, and this is your corporate counsel. You can trust them. Eleanor stared at them, her brow furrowed in suspicion. I forced a smile. Congratulations, by the way. Even if you can't remember it, you made it. At 30, Eleanor, you are a massive success. But she just stared at me, her mind elsewhere. How many years have we been married? She asked. 5, I answered patiently. She did the math in her head, her gaze becoming distant. So we got married right after college. Do we have children? I hesitated for a moment. Yes, I said, my voice flat. But we lost the baby at 4 months. Eleanor flinched as if struck. The words were a physical blow. Her hand fell from my arm, and her body began to tremble. She had no memory of the event, but the pain was there, a phantom limb of grief. She stood there, shaking violently, bewildered by the sudden, soul-crushing sorrow that had ambushed her. She clutched her head again. Julian, I watched her, my expression cold and unmoved. I watched as she collapsed again, curling up on the hospital bed, her face contorted in agony, tears streaming from her eyes. As doctors and nurses rushed to her side, I turned to the stunned secretary. Please reschedule our appointment at City Hall. Next Wednesday will be fine. The secretary looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth to speak, but said nothing. I had already turned and walked away. I was 25 when I got married. We were broke, but it felt right. I emptied my pockets and scraped together just enough to buy a cheap strawberry cake from a corner bakery. That was my proposal. No flowers, no diamond ring, no fancy dinner. Just a cake in our tiny, cramped apartment. We smeared frosting on each other's faces and were still hungry afterward, so I made instant noodles. Standing in the steamy little kitchen, Eleanor suddenly said, "Let's get married." I paused, then smiled. Okay. The next day, we were husband and wife. We were childhood sweethearts, neighbors who grew up together. She was the only one I had ever loved, from my awkward teenage years to the cusp of my 30s. There was no old flame, no other woman, no dramatic third act. We were a team, working side by side, building our dream. By 30, we had made it. My company, built on groundbreaking tech, landed several major contracts. Investment money poured in. We were the city's new power couple. Then, at 31, I walked in on Eleanor in bed with her male secretary. Our marriage imploded. It happened in our home. Eleanor was still drunk, confused by the sudden intrusion. I threw a bottle of water in her face to wake her up. My friends cornered Leo in the bathroom, wrapped in nothing but a towel. He was so terrified he was about to fall to his knees and beg. It was Miss Jiang. She told me to come over, he stammered. I'm just an intern. How could I say no to my boss? Pathetic. My friends were already rolling up their sleeves. I always knew you had a gift for this, I sneered at him. I should have put you in the marketing department. We have a client, a Mr. Kingsley, who has a particular taste for young men like you. Since you're so eager to please, you could probably land us that contract. The bonus is well over 6 figures. He stared at me, dumbfounded, realizing I was serious. He clutched his towel tighter, his only defense a weak protest. My feelings for Miss Jiang are genuine. His stupidity was almost comical. But the laughter died in my throat when Eleanor, having wiped her face and dressed, calmly stood up and asked for a divorce. Just like that. She was willing to dissolve our assets, to jeopardize the company we built together. She was determined to have my wedding ring off her finger within 3 months. That very night, she packed a bag and left. I raged. I yelled. I smashed things in the office. But it was over. The damage was done. My world had shattered. During the negotiations, her sharp-witted secretary ran circles around me. The divorce agreement was a masterpiece of legal brutality. I was cut out of the company, awarded less than a third of our shared assets. Eleanor even demanded half the value of our home, the down payment for which my parents had provided. I couldn't believe it. But by the time I finally accepted the grim reality and agreed to sign, Eleanor, the brilliant, ruthless woman who had orchestrated my downfall, was in a hospital bed with no memory of any of it. It was as if the years of struggle, success, and betrayal had been wiped clean by the accident. She had, in a twisted sense, lived out the cliché. After a lifetime of striving, she had returned to being a girl. She understood nothing of the corporate world she had built. Her mind, stuck at 20, could handle quadratic equations, but was baffled by profit and loss statements. The documents her secretary handed her were meaningless symbols. But she remembered me. I could barely recall what I looked like at 20. But the 20-year-old Eleanor, with her unfiltered adoration, was impossible to ignore, especially when her eyes, full of a love I thought was long dead, followed only me. Honestly, I never expected her secretary to have such nerve. After helping Eleanor systematically dismantle my life and my finances, diverting shares, leveraging the board against me, and costing me at least $50 million, she had the audacity to show up at my door. She had brought Eleanor with her. It was a calculated move. She had used me as bait to coax her amnesiac boss into attending a critical board meeting, promising Eleanor she could see me afterward. They arrived just as I was overseeing the removal of the last pieces of furniture from our former home. Since Eleanor had walked out the day she was caught, I had no desire to stay in that house of ghosts. A friend had helped me find a new apartment, and I was moving my things, our things. I had no intention of leaving these expensive, memory-laden pieces for her and her new lover to enjoy. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. The secretary was visibly uncomfortable, aware of the financial ruin she had helped orchestrate. I was equally on edge, caught in the act of absconding with marital property. She broke the silence. "Julian," she began, trying for a conciliatory tone. "You have to understand, I was just doing my job. I work for her. Miss Jiang has been very good to me. I couldn't afford to be sentimental," she added. I gave her a look of utter contempt. Good to her? Was I supposed to suffer for her good fortune? She had only lost a boss. I had lost $50 million. While we spoke in hushed tones on the balcony, Eleanor wandered through the empty rooms. Seeing us whispering, she grew anxious and came over, placing herself between us. "Is this what our new house looks like?" she asked, pointing at the packed boxes. "This place seems nice. Why are we moving? Are we upgrading to somewhere bigger?" "I'm moving out," I said, my voice flat. "You're staying here." She looked utterly confused. I delivered the final blow. "Because we agreed to a divorce last month." "The reason?" "You cheated on me." I didn't expect her to laugh, but she did. She laughed so hard she had to bend over, clutching her stomach, the sound echoing through the empty house. "Don't be ridiculous," the 20-year-old Eleanor chuckled. "Why would I ever divorce you?" I looked at her, my face a mask. "All good things come to an end, Eleanor." "Impossible," she shot back instantly. "I could believe it if you told me we never got together in the first place. But if we're married, I would never, ever leave you." The irony was so bitter it made me want to laugh too. She had forgotten. Forgotten the vicious, one-sided property division. Forgotten the cold, impassive look on her face as she slid that divorce agreement across the table. Forgotten her own words. "Let's just end it, Julian. It's a relief for both of us." The 20-year-old Eleanor remembered none of that. She was naive, full of blind faith in a future she believed we would share until we were old and gray. And in that moment, a furious rage swelled inside me. Why was I always the one who got hurt? No, this time, she would feel it too. "Why?" I challenged her. "Why are you so sure we'd never split up?" Eleanor looked me straight in the eye. For a second, the 20-year-old girl and the 30-year-old CO merged into one. Her gaze was intense, unwavering. "Because I was in love with you for so many years," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that stunned me into silence. "After finally having you, why would I ever let you go?" The words hung in the air. The secretary's face paled. She couldn't comprehend this new, passionate version of her boss fawning over the man she had just divorced. And I said nothing, because she was right. The 20-year-old Eleanor had loved me just like that. The intensity of her own confession seemed to embarrass her. She mumbled something about checking the kitchen and quickly fled. The The secretary and I were left alone on the balcony, the silence stretching between us. What could she possibly say? Congratulations, my boss is in love with you again. Or sorry, she's not in her right mind, but the divorce is still on. Nothing fit. Because the Eleanor who loved me like that was a ghost from a decade ago. This was just a temporary reprieve. A beautiful dream from which she would eventually wake, and we would be back where we started. The 30-year-old Eleanor, her love eroded by time and ambition, found me tiresome. Our marriage was beyond repair. But as I watched her moving awkwardly around the kitchen, a slow smile spread across my face. It was a gentle, tender smile, the kind I hadn't worn in years, as if I had truly been moved by her words and transported back to the height of our love. I didn't leave. Instead, I invited her to stay for dinner. I was the perfect, doting husband, my eyes full of the same warmth she remembered. At first, Eleanor was taken aback by my sudden change in demeanor, but she quickly relaxed into it. After all, in her mind, 10 years had passed. We had been married for 5 of them. We were husband and wife. What was more natural than sharing a meal together? Seeing her so blissfully unaware, my smile widened. An amnesiac Eleanor was still Eleanor. An Eleanor with the mind of her 20-year-old self was still Eleanor. And as Eleanor, she still had the legal right to alter documents, to make voluntary gifts. Excellent. I knew exactly how I was going to get my $50 million back. Initially, our divorce had been a war zone. The battle for control of the company we built together threw our entire team into chaos, forcing employees to choose sides. Leo, the catalyst for it all, became a pariah. But as I was systematically pushed out and stripped of my power, the tides turned. Reality is a harsh mistress. My marital problems were ultimately my own. As much as my employees sympathized with me, they had families to feed. They couldn't risk their careers for my sake. So, while they despised Leo for what he did, they began to accept his inevitable rise. Leo probably believed it himself. Until the day Eleanor and I walked into the office, hand in hand. The shock was palpable. To the 20-year-old Eleanor, I was still the center of her universe. It didn't matter that I was no longer the lanky student she remembered. She poured all of her pent-up, decade-old love onto me. And I, no longer an innocent boy, knew her better than anyone. I knew which buttons to push, how to stoke the flames of her affection. It was easy to make her fall for me all over again. Most of our longtime employees were thrilled. They had witnessed our journey from the beginning, from a cramped startup to a corporate powerhouse. They had been genuinely saddened by our split and were overjoyed to see us reconciled. But not everyone was happy. The secretary, having joined the company later, had only known the bitter, resentful version of our relationship. Now, she watched in horror as her brilliant boss acted like a love-struck fool, catering to my every whim. She believed Eleanor was simply disoriented from the accident, and she saw me as a predator, poised to take advantage of her vulnerable employer. She tried to warn Eleanor, to offer some harsh words of caution. Eleanor simply smiled. Then, in a sudden explosion of rage, she slammed her hands on the desk, shot to her feet, and ordered the secretary out of her office. The secretary's message was blunt. "Boss, that man is no good for you." Eleanor's response was even blunter. "And you think you're any better?" A vein throbbed on Eleanor's forehead as she stood, face flushed, shouting with a complete lack of her usual composure. "I've known Julian my whole life. We were neighbors. Do you understand? When I was 16, my parents skipped town on a mountain of debt, and I couldn't even afford my school fees. It was Julian. He gave me every cent of his pocket money to keep me in school. He skipped his own breakfast so I could eat." She was practically hyperventilating, her eyes red with fury. His family wasn't wealthy either. If his parents found out, they would have punished him for helping me. But he knelt on the floor and begged them to give me a chance. Her jaw was clenched, but tears began to stream down her flushed cheeks. "So don't you dare tell me he's not good to me," she choked out. "He is the best person to me in this entire world. He's all I have. When I was 16, my mother tried to sell me off to pay a debt. The men were going to cut off my hand, and Julian stood in front of me. He told them to take his hand instead. You say he's only being nice to me now because he wants my company. But without Julian, there would be no company. Everything I have," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction, "should be his." The secretary, drenched in the coffee Eleanor had thrown at her, stood in stunned silence. I stood just outside the office door, listening to it all. Other employees passing by heard it too, their faces a mixture of pity and confusion. They looked at me, the tragic hero of this bizarre play. They remembered the messy divorce, the public humiliation. They knew Eleanor was not in her right mind. But they had also seen the cold, unforgiving woman she had been in that very same office, the woman who had shown me no mercy. The passion of youth, it seemed, was a powerful, destructive force. I said nothing. As Eleanor's tirade reached its peak, I knocked softly on the door, drawing the attention of the furious woman inside.